There's really only two categories of doctors that know much about vaccines, and it's not the pediatricians, it's the vaccinologists. They know, which is why they're not going to show up at a Senate hearing to debate you. And it's the doctors that actually really study these products. And those folks, they often stop giving them.
Are we being told the full truth when it comes to vaccine safety? And when mandates are involved, is informed consent even possible? I spoke with leading civil rights attorney Siri recently. He's stood in front of the FDA and the CDC and the Senate, and he's calling for transparency when it comes to data that relates to vaccines that has previously been withheld from the public. This is a conversation you don't want to miss.
Siri, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Listen, the CDC, as you know, effectively downgraded 5 routine childhood vaccines from their recommended schedule yesterday. Is this, in legal terms, some kind of admission that the U.S. schedule expanded for decades without sufficient evidence?
Oh, the U.S. schedule has expanded for decades without sufficient evidence is clear as day just from reviewing the FDA website. Just look at the clinical trial relied upon to license each vaccine. You didn't need yesterday's actions to affirm that truth.
That's true. That's true. And so if you were going to deselect another recommended vaccine, which one would you pick?
All vaccines should be shared clinical decision making. That's the way medicine should work. You go meet with your doctor, you decide whether that's right for you or your child, and you get it or you don't get the shot, or you don't get the drug, or you don't put the medical device. That's the way it should work. It should work no differently for vaccines. People have just been conditioned otherwise when it comes to vaccines, but it's the wrong way to think about it. They always say, let's depoliticize vaccines, and I completely agree. Get them out of politics. That means get rid of mandates. Make them like every other medicine. Based purely on the medicine, not politics, not coercion, not mandates, not force.
In what ways has coercion and force played a part in our current understanding of how vaccines should be taken or gotten for our children?
Oh, I mean, when does the government use force? When they can't persuade you on the merits, right? They can't persuade you on the merits. So then they start a little coercion, a little more coercion, then the mandates, then censorship. And that's how governments operate. That's the problem with having government in the business of vaccines. The business of vaccines should be the business of pharma, not the business of the government. Okay, pharma should persuade you. Pharma should advertise them. Pharma should get you to take the products, not the government through mandates, immunity to liability, promotion campaigns, and they still can't get you to take them. You know there's a problem.
I know that's right. And I wish when my kids were little and I was taking them to the wellness visits where they were given a bunch of vaccines, I wish someone had just taken the time to say, here's the insert. But no one ever showed me any insert. And in that way, it's not really informed consent, is it?
You know, in my view, informed consent takes the form of what the parent, chooses in some respects, right? Some parents say, listen, doc, I don't want to know anything. I trust you implicitly. Others, like you said, might say, look, I would like to, what are the risks and benefits? And in that context, I agree with you. If you asked and you weren't given the basic information, like at least told what was being disclosed by the manufacturer for the product, that's certainly not proper informed consent. But I'll tell you what is absolutely never informed consent is when there is a mandate, because coercion destroys the ability to actually truly consent. The whole idea is you inform me, and then I choose whether to consent. If I then say no and say fine, but you don't get to go to school, no job, no, that's not consent. That's destructive to the whole notion of consent.
And of course, we lost that during the time of COVID. Like people were losing their jobs and not allowed to go to schools or to travel or go to restaurants because they weren't taking the vaccine. I was like, what happened to the privacy? Wasn't there supposed to be like some kind of HIPAA rule in place where I didn't have to disclose what I've done with my body?
And what happened is that Pharma realized it's a lot cheaper to get mandates than to do a public campaign to get you to take products. Would you rather spend $100 million to persuade you or $5 million in lobbying, $10 million to get the government to require it, right? Think about it. From a business perspective, it makes far more sense to get the government to mandate it. At the end of the day, your body and your kid's body are the commodity on which pharma makes their money. The more they can inject, ingest, and get on your body, the more money they can make. And the quickest route there is to force you to do it, right? Tell you they're safe and effective. You're not allowed to ask questions, no questions, and so So yeah, so that's it. And really, when it's pretty sad because in the land of the free, right, we are far less free in most countries that don't have vaccine mandates. And Denmark, Sweden, Norway, most provinces of Canada, even developing countries that we think of as lacking freedoms, many of them don't have mandates. So for the land of the free, we're not doing such a great job in that department.
No. And some would say even the CDC recommended vaccine schedule for children is really recommended. It's not a mandate, is it?
Yes, technically the CDC schedule is a recommendation by the CDC, but everybody knows that when they routinely recommend, it becomes a mandate. Why? Because all of the liaison organizations that are appended to CDC, in particular the Vaccine Committee, ACIP, then go out and basically effectively push for the mandates. I mean, the American Academy of Pediatric, which has been a primary liaison member to the CDC's ACIP committee for forever, and in fact put a statement out calling for the revocation of all non-medical exemptions across the country. You don't like aborted fetal tissue? The billions of pieces, literally, of human DNA and cellular debris that are in every single viral MMR vaccine. You don't want that injected into your kid? Too bad, the AAP says. Now you can't go to school. See, that's the problem is, yes,
Right.
it is a recommendation, but the Rose recommendations turn into mandates. Everybody knows it.
Oh my gosh, it's so horrifying. So, what can we do to push back against, well, to defend our freedoms, let's just say?
Here's the thing with vaccines. Unlike every other medical product, every other product, period, every other product, the company that sells it has an economic self-interest that drives safety. So it self-corrects over time in one form or another, right? Sheetrock causes cancer. They're going to make without, cars, planes, drug product, everything. It will self-correct because eventually they'll be held accountable. But with vaccines, are the only product in the market, the only one where you cannot sue to say, hey, had you made that product safer, my kid wouldn't be dead, seriously injured, or I wouldn't be, well, you can't say that once you're dead. But the point is that there's not going to be that kind of self-correction with vaccines. Well, maybe there will hopefully be now that they're not routine, but there won't be. And the more that folks wake up to the fact that these are products, they're products. There's no special powers to them. Stop believing in them. Start thinking about them, which is why I wrote the book that, as you know about, that I put out there. The whole point of my book is to get people to start thinking about them as products. Not good, not bad, not pro, not anti, just products, Instead of reacting with, well, I believe in them, you react with, oh, let me think about that.
You make a valid point. I feel like people aren't thinking anymore. It's like they want the vaccine so desperately because they've been so programmed to believe that they're necessary for health and to avoid these outbreaks of measles or what have you. They really have a hard time thinking critically and seeing them as products, as you're saying.
Well, that's because they're told everyone will die if without vaccines. Vaccines are the only thing that save us, not God, not anything else, just vaccines. Vaccines are the only thing that save you. Everyone will die without them, and they're 100% safe. Nobody ever that is 1 in a million harm. That's what you're told. And from that perspective, you're like, wow, that's the most incredible invention ever, right?
Yeah.
But I will say when the day before I first started doing this work, I probably had those same views if had you asked me. I mean, what did I know? Just like the typical person. You go through life and you just pick up cultural cognition, like what is the general view on things. But in a decade of deposing the world's leading vaccinologists, deposing immunologists, infectious disease doctors, suing federal health authorities, forcing them and holding them to their claims and demanding the proof, and then looking at the proof that's contrary, are really, what's clear is that most of those claims, they're not based on science. They're based on beliefs. They are beliefs, but they're worse than a belief like a religion. Like in a real religion, you're believing. These folks think that it's based on the evidence, but it's not. That's why I wrote the books, and I go through each of those primary claims, try to make it fun, and I explain how here's the claim, and then here's what I uncovered.
What was the most surprising uncovering that you did, do you think? What feedback are you getting from the readers?
Oh, you mean for me personally? For me,
Yeah.
what was the most surprising thing?
Yeah, and the readers, but I'm curious for you.
Well, for the reader, well, I'll tell you for me. For me, the thing that surprised the most, it was the clinical trials relied upon to license childhood vaccines for safety are just shocking, right? But that's still not the most. And the post-licensure safety, still not the most. The lack of liability, shocking, but still not the most. It's odd. I mean, this might sound odd, but the thing that I really has always struck me so much is that otherwise really intelligent, presumably individuals, these vaccinologists that run this small group of folks that run the cabal of vaccinology, the way they assume safety, they just assume it basically. It's an a priori assumption that they're safe, and somehow they expect you to show them it's not safe. That's not the way this works. It's not like, oh, hey, wait a second, this car, so is it safe? No, 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 no. You have to prove to me it's not safe, otherwise you got to buy my car. What? You'd be like, that sounds ridiculous. Oh,
Yeah.
no, no, no. You got to prove to me this statin's harmful, else you're taking that statin or you're not going to school. What? It sounds but that's the way vaccines work. And people accept it. No, you got to show me. What do you mean I got to show? No, you got to show me it's safe. Show me the clinical trial that shows it's safe. Show me the post-licensure safety. You say it doesn't cause autism? Okay, great. Show me the study that shows that Hep B vaccine doesn't cause autism. Where is it? That DTaP doesn't cause autism. That HIV vaccine doesn't cause autism. That IPV vaccine doesn't cause autism. Right? All of these given 3 times in the first 6 months of life. Where's the study that shows those don't cause autism? We sued the CDC. They don't have those studies. They don't exist. In fact, the studies that have done of those vaccines, the few that exist, there are very few, like one out of Stony Brook, the Goodman study showed kids that got Hep B vaccine in the first month of life had 3 times risk of autism compared to those who didn't. It's the only Hep B study I know, by the way. The only one. And out of a major university, by the way, University of Stony Brook. That part is always and continues to surprise me. How somehow it's placed on the, on the burden on the parents to show it's not safe versus them having to prove it is safe. For the folks who read the book, I think one of the things they find most shocking is the immunity. It's amazing to me that people still don't know how vaccines are the only products that have this special immunity.
Do you think that will ever turn around, Aaron?
Well, I don't know if Congress will ever repeal the law because there's over 1,000 pharma lobbyists and there are no vaccine safety lobbyists that I know of. But for the immunity to stop applying, the vaccine, for the immunity to attach, the vaccine needs to be routinely recommended. So if it's not routinely recommended, there should be no immunity.
I'm trying to wrap my head around what you're saying. And also when you said there's no vaccine safety lobbyists, you know who it is? It's the moms. It's the parents of children who have been damaged by these vaccinations. They're unstoppable, I think.
I think eventually that will turn the tide. And the New York Times doesn't get it. Why do millions of people support Bobby? Why do people have issues with vaccines? What they're just like making it up. What do you think? Like somebody woke up one day and said, you know what I want to do today? I'm going to take a socially ostracizing position that might get my kids kicked out of school. I'm going to throw it at my job. I'll be called an anti-science, anti-vaxxer, a quack. My friends will stop potentially interacting with me. I'll get thrown out of my parent meeting. No, people have a pretty powerful experience, or they've learned something they cannot unlearn that makes them go down this road. There is an incredible amount of social pressure, economic pressure, and legal pressure pushing back on somebody not vaccinating. And to still not vaccinate in the face of all that, you're just going to chalk it up to being a crank? Come on. Journalists, you got to be the laziest journalist on the planet to reach that conclusion and not really look at why these folks, millions of them in America, are out there. Why? And the reality is that, in my experience, it's because most of them have had a personal negative experience, they or somebody they love, with one of these products. Okay, that's why they're licensed, because they can harm people. Otherwise, they'd just be over the counter. They'd be water. The reason they're licensed is because they can hurt people. All right, it can seriously hurt people. And as a society, what do we normally do when people get hurt? We're supposed to take care of them. We're supposed to, care for them. We're supposed to compensate them. We're supposed to treat them. What do you do with these folks? Go into a doctor's office and say, my kid's, I think has encephalopathy from a car accident. Get treated. From a drug, get treated. You name the list. Say from a vaccine, watch how you're treated. Look how you're treated in that medical office. You're not going to get treated right.
Yeah. So it seems to me there are other incentives that kind of blind people to the reality in front of them. You were like, how can these vaccinologists and these others like hold so tightly to them? I think it gets to the point where the money, I think, has blinded them, or their belief in the vaccine protocol, I guess. I'm thinking about how parents don't even know also that doctors are financially incentivized to vaccinate the patients that they see.
That is the business model. I mean, when you think about well child visits, right? On this, so you're told you got to come in for well child visit 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18. What are those? Well, those are vaccine visits. The whole model around pediatric visits, and they'll say, "Oh, well, we don't make money off the vaccines." Yeah, but the kid's not in your office if it's not for vaccines. The whole reason you have a client showing up in your medical practice at 2, 4, 6, 12 months, 18, 4 years is basically it's a vaccine appointment. I mean, that's essentially, in large part, what it is. So, yes. Now, look, most pediatricians, the reality is they just follow what the CDC says. They don't know anything about these products. I mean, I've never deposed a pediatrician that knows anything other than surface level information about vaccines. They really don't know much. I mean, most doctors don't know anything about vaccines. There's really only two categories of doctors that know much about vaccines, and it's not the pediatricians, it's not the immunologists, and it's not the infectious disease doctors. Oh, they probably know. They think they know, but they don't know much. It's the vaccinologists. They know, which is why they're not going to show up at a Senate hearing to debate you. The only time you're ever going to really get a vaccinologist is in a deposition where they're compelled to answer questions. And it's the doctors that actually really study these products. And those folks, they often stop giving them.
That's right. And I remember, I think it was in Dell's movie, An Inconvenient Study, that there was a pediatrician who said, maybe she was on the stage afterwards, like she gives her kids the options, or she gives the parents the option to vaccinate or not vaccinate. And overwhelmingly, the parents who choose not to vaccinate their children have healthier children. So it's a matter of experiencing it. So as we wrap up, Erin, I want to ask you one more question. What message would you give a lawyer or a parent who is afraid to speak up about what they've seen, who doesn't want to be called a crank, let's say, or losing their reputation as a medical professional?
I would say that for medical professionals and even for parents, you don't need to go anywhere far beyond. You don't need to go beyond what's literally in the FDA and CDC documentation as a place to start. I mean, just start with the clinical trial relied upon to license the particular vaccine that's under discussion, right? They tell you these are the most thoroughly, robustly studied products before they're gone and given to millions of healthy babies, right? Because once that happens, you can't do a clinical trial, placebo-controlled trial. They say it's unethical. So before it goes on the market, you want to make sure there's a proper clinical trial. Well, go take a look. Go to the FDA website, pull up the package insert for that vaccine, go to section 6.1. That is the section where federal regulations require a summary of the clinical trial relied upon to license that vaccine for safety. And just show it to a parent. Just look at it. You will be, I assure you, if your jaw's not hitting the floor, that's because you're not reading it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I hope our conversation today opens a lot of eyes and gets people just to ask questions so that they can actually see the truth about what's happening and the difference between informed consent and coercion. Thank you, Erin Siri. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you.